Snow didn't fall that night. It cut, like shards of glass against the skin, as a little girl stumbled through the storm carrying words no child should ever carry. Lantern light glowed faintly from the cabin at the edge of the prairie, a single place of warmth in a land bent on coldness. Her tiny fists beat against the heavy door, each knock weaker than the last, until it opened and the towering figure of Jedediah Harlow stood framed in firelight and shadow. His eyes, gray and worn, widened when he saw her. The child was no taller than his waist, her hair dark and matted with ice, her lips blue from the cold. Her voice came broken, no more than a breath, but clear enough to pierce the marrow of his bones. "They are beating my mama, for being Chinese. Please save her." Jed froze. He had lived through the war, had seen men torn apart by both bullet and shame, but nothing had stopped him cold like those words. He had sworn long ago not to interfere in the ugliness of this town, not after what it had cost him. They said his hands were cursed, that his size made him dangerous, that Jed Harlow was a man better left alone. The town had written him off, and in his shame, he let them. But here stood a child who did not know the whispers, who had come because her mother told her someone good still lived out here. "Please, mister," she whispered again, clutching the edge of his coat. She said someone would listen. Jed knelt, his massive frame folding down until his face was level with hers. "That ain't what folks say about me," he said, his voice gravel, his breath steaming in the frozen air. Her eyes glistened in the storm's faint light. "Mama says the wind can't break a mountain. Are you a mountain?" The words sliced him deeper than any accusation ever had. He swore under his breath, then lifted her into his arms, carrying her inside only long enough to wrap her in his wool coat. He had spent years keeping the world out, but he could not shut the door on her. Minutes later, his horse was saddled, snow gathering in its mane, and the little girl, May, was pressed against his chest, her small hands tucked inside his coat. The storm thickened around them, snow whipping across his face, stinging his scarred cheek. His jaw clenched against the memory of the last time he rode into town to stop a beating. He had saved a man then, only to be accused of bloodlust when the mob dispersed. The man himself turned against him to earn favor. Jed had worn that shame ever since. But this was different. This was a child's plea. As they rode past the town's edge, faces appeared at frosted windows, shadows muttering in the dark. A man spit into the snow as Jed passed. "Traitor to your own kind," he growled. Jed's jaw tightened, but he did not answer. May's head rested against his shoulder, her breaths shallow. He shifted his coat to cover her better. From the churchyard ahead came the preacher's voice, carried strangely clear through the storm. "Whosoever oppresses the poor reproaches his Maker, but he who honors him has mercy on the needy." The words rang hollow when paired with the crack of a whip. Jed's stomach turned. He urged his horse forward, boots crunching against frozen earth. The sight that met him was a painting of cruelty, a woman bound upright against a post in the snow, her hair loose and black as night, her back bloodied by lashes that striped across her pale dress. Men stood around her, settlers with hard eyes and cruel mouths. They paused only when Jed's shadow fell long across the snow. The tallest of them sneered. "Step aside, Harlow. This ain't your fight." Jed dismounted, lowering May carefully to the ground. The child rushed forward, her tiny arms clinging to her mother's legs, sobbing her name. Lien lifted her head weakly, her face swollen, blood freezing at her temple. Jed walked forward with measured steps, each crunch of snow like a drumbeat. He did not draw his gun. He stood there, broad and silent, until the silence itself began to unnerve them. "This fight belongs to every man," he said finally, voice deep and even. "Especially when you raise a hand to a woman." A whip cracked toward him. He didn't move aside. The leather cut across his forearm, blood blooming beneath the sleeve, but he didn't flinch. He took the lash and kept walking, eyes locked on the man who swung it. Something in that stillness, that refusal to react, made the others falter. The storm seemed to pause, snow falling in slower silence. "You'll hang for this," one spat. Jed bent, untying Lien with hands steady as stone. He wrapped his coat around her shoulders, lifting her as though she weighed nothing. May clung to his side, holding her mother's hand as best she could. A voice rose from the crowd, the sheriff's, slurred with drink. "Harlow, you're gonna regret this. We'll drag you all out by dawn." Jed turned his head, gray eyes colder than the storm. "Better a rope than a coward's tongue," he answered. He began to walk, carrying Lien, May at his side. The crowd shifted back, unsettled by the weight of their own shame. Not one raised a hand to stop him. Snow fell heavier, blanketing the scene as if to bury it in silence. But just as Jed thought they were clear, a shout split the storm. A man at the edge raised a rifle, aiming not at him, but at May. The world slowed to ice. The girl's small frame was in the crosshairs. Jed turned, moving faster than any man his size should. He twisted his body, shielding her with his own bulk. The gun cracked, fire and thunder in the snow. For a heartbeat, all was still. Then the gunman staggered back, a knife buried in his chest. No one had seen Lien's hand move, but there she was, bloodied and trembling, holding the second knife she had hidden in her sleeve all along. The settlers recoiled, stunned by the sudden violence from the woman they had beaten nearly to death. She whispered through swollen lips, her voice like the wind breaking free, "You will not touch my daughter." The man fell into the snow, lifeless. Silence heavier than the storm followed. Jed met her eyes not broken but burning with defiance. For the first time, he understood, she had not been waiting for rescue. She had been waiting for someone willing to stand beside her fire. No one else moved against them. The mob melted into the storm, their courage gone with the life of their companion. Jed carried Lien through the blizzard, May gripping both of them as if binding the three together. Back at the cabin, the fire crackled, painting their faces in gold and shadow. Lien lay resting, her daughter curled against her, both breathing steady now. Jed sat by the fire, blood still seeping from his arm, but his heart steady for the first time in years. He looked at the girl, then at her mother, and knew the town's judgment would come with morning. But he also knew the rope had no power over a man who had chosen to stand. So remember this, listener by the fire, the voice of the story concludes, old and steady. Storms will always come, and men will always talk. But the measure of a life is not in the names they call you, nor the lies they tell. It is in whether you stood, and whether someone rose because you did. And as the wind howled outside, the cabin's fire held, three figures bound by blood, defiance, and something stronger than the storm itself. Which city are you watching our video from? Please leave a comment. Please subscribe to the channel as well. Thank you.